They walk in like a storm, all thunder and heat, expecting your spirit to bow at their feet. They've mastered the volume, the glare, and the pace, leaving no room for your voice or your space. But remember the lesson the mountain once told, to the wind that was fierce and the rain that was cold. You can howl at my peaks, you can scream at my bone, but you cannot move what is made out of stone. Power is a shadow, tall but it's thin. It only has weight if you let the dark in. We've all been there. You're in a meeting or a kitchen or a heated conversation, and you feel the air being sucked out of the room. Someone is taller, louder, or just more aggressive, and suddenly you feel like you're shrinking. You start to apologize for things you didn't do. You start to talk faster because you're afraid they'll cut you off. You are being overpowered. But I want to tell you something that might change the way you breathe. No one can overpower you without your participation. Power isn't something people have, it's something people exchange. And today, I'm going to teach you how to cancel that transaction. When someone is steamrolling you, when they are talking over you like you're not even there, your instinct is to get louder. Don't do that. When you get louder, you're just joining their chaos. You're playing their game on their court. Instead, I want you to do the most uncomfortable thing possible. Use their name and then stop. Just say, John, and wait. That silence is a circuit break. It forces them to stop their momentum to see why you called them. When they stop, you don't complain. You don't say, you're interrupting me. That's a victim's line. Instead, you say, I'm not finished with that thought yet. Then you go right back to your original pace. Not faster, not louder, just steady. You aren't asking for permission to speak. You are informing them that you are speaking. Overpowering people are hunters. They are looking for why. They want you to justify your no. They want you to explain your boundaries so they can find the holes in your logic. When you feel pressured to give an answer you aren't ready to give, stop providing the data. We feel like we owe the world an explanation for our existence. We don't. When someone is pushing you into a corner, use the strategic vague. Say that's an interesting perspective. I'll give it the consideration it requires. That's it. You haven't said yes. You haven't said no. You've simply closed the door. You've taken the why off the table. When you stop giving people ammunition, they have nothing to shoot at. When someone is being aggressive or condescending, they are trying to make you feel confused or inferior. They want you to scramble. Instead of scrambling, pivot the burden of the conversation back to them. Look at them calmly, directly, and ask, am I being clear or are you having trouble following my point? Now, listen to the shift in that sentence. You aren't asking, does that make sense? Because that implies you might be confusing. You are asking if they have the capacity to understand. It is a subtle, high-status shift that tells the other person, I am the authority here, and I am waiting for you to catch up. It stops the overpowering energy in its tracks because it requires them to self-reflect. In the arena of human communication, power is rarely seized through a single grand gesture. Instead, it is stolen in increments, second by second, through the manipulation of pacing. Most people believe that the person who talks the fastest or the loudest is the one in control, but the opposite is true. High-status authority is found in the ability to dictate the tempo of the room. When someone interrupts you or speaks over you, they are attempting to hijack your rhythm. They are forcing you into a reactive state where you feel the physiological urge to speed up, to squeeze your thoughts into the gaps they leave, or to raise your volume to compete with their noise. The moment you do this, the moment you begin to race against their interruption, you have already lost. You have signaled to everyone watching that your words are a commodity that must be rushed before they are taken away. To reclaim your power, you have to master the interruption reset, a technique that relies not on aggression but on the deliberate deceleration of the moment. The first step in the reset is a counter-intuitive move. When they go loud, you go slow. Raising your voice to win an interruption only creates a shouting match, and in a shouting match, the most irrational person always wins. Instead, you must lower your speed. By slowing down your cadence, you signal that you are unimpressed by their urgency. You project a level of psychological comfort that suggests you have all the time in the world, which immediately makes the interrupter look frantic and unhinged by comparison. Within this slowed tempo, you deploy the name pause proceed technique. This is the surgical tool for stopping a steamroller. When the person cuts you off, you do not keep talking. You stop mid-sentence, look them directly in the eye, and say their name, just their name, in a neutral, downward inflected tone. You aren't shouting it. You are simply stating it as a fact. The name is the most powerful word in any person's vocabulary. It acts as a cognitive pattern interrupt. It forces their brain to momentarily drop their train of thought and refocus on the person who just identified them. But the magic isn't just in the name. It's in the pause that follows. After you say, John, you must wait. You must allow a 2 to 3 second gap of silence to hang in the air. This silence is a vacuum that sucks the energy out of their interruption. It creates a status check. In that silence, the interrupter realizes they have been called out, and the rest of the room realizes that the flow of the conversation has been reclaimed. This pause is the ultimate display of self-assurance because it shows you are comfortable with the tension of the dead air. You are proving that you do not fear the confrontation. You are simply managing it. Once the pause has landed and the interrupter has stopped their momentum, you proceed. You do not say, you interrupted me, or can I finish? Asking, can I finish, is a plea for permission, and high-status individuals never ask for permission to hold the floor they already own. Instead, you simply pick up exactly where you left off, or you say, I'm not finished with that point yet, and then continue. By returning to your original, slow and deliberate pace, you are informing the other person that their attempt to steal your power was unsuccessful. You are demonstrating that your rhythm is governed by your own internal clock, not by their external pressure. This creates a lasting psychological effect. People who are habitual interrupters are like bullies on a playground. They look for the easiest target. When they realize that every time they interrupt you, they are met with a calm, name-based reset and a heavy silence, they will stop trying. They will subconsciously learn that trying to overpower your pacing is an exhausting and losing battle. You haven't just finished your sentence. You have re-established the boundary of your presence. You have moved from a person who has talked to a person who is listened to simply by refusing to join the race. You have turned their noise into a backdrop for your stillness, and in that stillness, your authority becomes absolute. In the high-stakes game of social dominance, information is the primary currency, and most people are bankrupting themselves without even realizing it. Overpowering individuals, the bullies, the micromanagers, and the narcissists thrive on your specific explanations. They are hunters of why. When they pressure you to do something you don't want to do, or when they push against a boundary you've set, they are waiting for you to offer a detailed justification. We are socially conditioned to believe that being honest and transparent is a virtue, so we provide the data. We say, I can't come to the meeting because I have a doctor's appointment at 4, or I can't lend you the money because my car insurance is due. We think we are being reasonable, but what we are actually doing is providing ammunition. The moment you give a specific reason, you have handed the overpowering person a target. They will begin to dismantle your reason. Can't you move the appointment? Or, insurance can be paid in installments, I really need the help. By being specific, you have invited them into a negotiation where they have no business being. To reclaim your authority, you must master the vague shield, the art of offering strategic vagueness to protect your boundaries without giving the other person a foothold. Strategic vagueness is not about being dishonest, it is about being intentional with your privacy. It is the refusal to let another person audit your life. When you use the vague shield, you are signaling that your decisions are not up for debate. Instead of a long-winded explanation that begs for approval, you offer a broad, unshakable statement. When pressured, you say, that won't work for me, or I have a personal commitment that I'm not able to move. Notice the lack of ammunition in those sentences. There is nothing for the other person to argue with. They can't tell you that your personal commitment because it's important because they don't know what it is. They can't offer a solution to, it won't work for me. Because there are no mechanics to fix. You have effectively closed the door and locked it from the inside. This is incredibly frustrating for an overpowering person because they rely on your need to be understood. When you stop trying to be understood and start being decisive, their power evaporates. This technique is particularly effective because it shifts the energy of the interaction from defensive to authoritative. When you explain yourself, you are in a subordinate position. You are essentially a child explaining a late homework assignment to a teacher. But when you are strategically vague, you are in the sovereign position. You are a person who has made a decision based on factors that you are not required to share. This creates a psychological barrier that commands respect. People who are high status are rarely open books. They understand that their reasons are their own. When you stop over-explaining, the room begins to perceive you as more mysterious, more calculated, and far more powerful. You are no longer a problem to be solved or a resource to be managed. You are a boundary that must be respected. The vague shield forces the other person to confront the reality that you are not seeking their permission. Furthermore, the vague shield protects your internal peace. Every time you justify your existence to an aggressive person, you lose a little bit of your self-respect. You feel that nice person resentment building up because you know you are being interrogated. By choosing to be vague, you stay in control of the emotional narrative. You don't have to get angry and you don't have to get defensive. You simply stay neutral. If they push further, and they will, you repeat the vague statement like a broken record. If they ask, well, why won't it work for you? You simply reply, for a variety of reasons, or it's just not a fit at this time. You are giving them nothing. You are becoming a smooth, vertical wall that they cannot climb. Eventually, they will get tired of the lack of traction and move on to a target that is more willing to provide the why. You aren't being mean. You are being a steward of your own life. You are deciding that your reasons are your property, and you are not in the business of selling your property to people who don't respect your value. By mastering the art of the vague response, you stop the interrogation before it even starts, ensuring that your boundaries remain intact and your authority remains unquestioned. In the high-stakes dance of social hierarchy, the person who asks the questions is the person who controls the room. Most of us, when we feel the pressure of an overpowering personality, fall into the understanding trap. We become desperate to be heard, so we ask questions that place the burden of competence on our own shoulders. We say things like, does that make sense? Or, do you see what I'm saying? Or, I hope I'm explaining this right? While these phrases feel polite, they are actually subconscious signals of submission. You are essentially asking the other person for permission to be considered coherent. You are suggesting that if there is a disconnect in the conversation, it is because of your failure to communicate. An overpowering person will subconsciously smell this blood in the water and use it to dominate the narrative. They will respond with a condescending "not really," or "you're being a bit confusing," which forces you back into a defensive, over-explaining posture. To break this cycle, you must use the "am I being clear?" pivot, a linguistic tactical strike that shifts the burden of understanding from your speaking to their listening. When you feel someone trying to steamroll your point or dismiss your perspective, you must stop mid-flow and look them directly in the eye. Instead of asking for their validation, you offer them a challenge. You ask, am I being clear, or are you having trouble following my point? Now pay close attention to the psychological architecture of that sentence. You are no longer questioning your ability to speak. You are questioning their capacity to hear. By offering them a choice between "I am clear" and "I am too complex for you," you have effectively boxed them in. If they say you are being clear, they have just signed a verbal contract that they understand and therefore must acknowledge your point. If they say they are having trouble following, they are admitting to a lack of comprehension, which is a low-status position. You have moved from being the person who is failing to explain to the person who is patiently waiting for the other to keep up. This is a masterclass in status management because it forces the dominant personality to stop their aggressive momentum and reflect on their own cognitive engagement with you. This pivot works because it targets the ego of the overperformer. Overpowering people generally pride themselves on being the smartest or quickest person in the room. When you suggest, even politely, that they might be having trouble following, you are creating a friction that their ego cannot ignore. It stops the steamroller effect instantly. It creates a status gap where you are the teacher and they are the struggling student. This doesn't require you to be rude or aggressive. In fact, it works best when delivered with a calm, almost curious tone. You aren't accusing them of being slow, you are simply checking in on their progress. This Check signals that you are the one setting the standard for the conversation. You are the one who determines the pace and the depth of the exchange. By shifting the burden of understanding, you are informing the other person that you are not there to audition for their approval, but to deliver a message that they are responsible for receiving. Furthermore, this technique acts as a psychological reset button for the entire interaction. When someone is trying to dominate a narrative, they are usually operating on a script of, I talk, you listen. Am I being clear? Pivot shreds that script. It introduces a moment of accountability that the overpowering person isn't prepared for. It forces them to move from a state of active projection to a state of active reflection. In that moment of reflection, the power dynamic levels out. You are reclaiming your presence as a peer, not a subordinate. You are showing that you have the self-assurance to stand behind your words and the authority to hold the other person accountable for their attention. This is the difference between being a voice in the background and being the authority in the foreground. You aren't just communicating a thought, you are commanding the space in which that thought exists. You are teaching the people around you that your time and your words are not to be dismissed, and that if they choose to participate in a conversation with you, the burden of being a competent listener is entirely on them. When you stop apologizing for the way you speak, people start paying a lot more attention to what you have to say. In the primal, wordless language of the human animal, authority is not heard, it is seen. Long before you open your mouth to deploy a name, pause, proceed, or a strategic vague, your body has already negotiated your status in the room. When we feel overpowered, our nervous system enters a state of high arousal, fight or flight, which manifests as a series of involuntary movements known as micro-fidgets. You might find yourself adjusting your glasses, clicking a pen, shifting your weight from foot to foot, or touching your neck. These movements are self-soothing behaviors. They are the body's attempt to discharge the nervous energy of feeling threatened. To the subconscious mind of an aggressor, these fidgets are like blood in the water. They are tell that reveals your internal discomfort. Every time you adjust your tie or play with your ring while someone is speaking over you, you are broadcasting that they have successfully disrupted your equilibrium. To reclaim your power, you must master the physical anchor, the disciplined practice of absolute stillness. Stillness is not passive, it is an active, aggressive display of self-control that acts as the ultimate threat to a bully's momentum. Stillness works because it is a direct violation of the interrupter's expectations. An overpowering person moves through the world like a predator, looking for signs of reactive energy. They want to see you scramble, blink, or shrink. When they push, they expect you to move. If they push and you remain as still as a stone, you create a psychological void that they cannot fill. By eliminating micro-fidgets, you are signaling that their presence has zero physiological impact on you. You are demonstrating that your internal state is governed by your own will, not by their external aggression. High-status authority is found in the economy of motion. Think of the most powerful people you've ever encountered. They don't rush, they don't twitch, and they don't leak energy. They take up space, and they hold it. When you anchor your body, feet flat on the floor, hands visible and resting, shoulders down and back, you are building a fortress of presence. This stillness creates a gravitational pull in the conversation because you aren't moving. The other person's frantic energy starts to look ridiculous and out of place. The most critical component of the physical anchor is the unblinking gaze. Most people, when intimidated, will look away, look down, or let their eyes dart around the room. This is a submissive appeasement signal. To anchor yourself, you must maintain steady, neutral eye contact. You aren't glaring, which is a sign of anger and therefore a loss of control. You are simply observing. When a bully is mid-sentence, trying to steamroll you, and you are standing there in total stillness, looking them directly in the eye with a neutral expression, you are performing a psychological turn. You are making them the object of observation. This is deeply unsettling for an aggressor. Their momentum relies on you being the prey that runs. When the prey stops and just looks, the predator's brain short-circuits. They begin to wonder what you know that they don't. They begin to wonder why you aren't afraid. That doubt is the exact moment their power over you breaks. Practicing the physical anchor also has a bottom-up effect on your own confidence. Through the principle of proprioception, The brain takes cues from the body just as much as the body takes cues from the brain. If you force your body into a state of stillness, you are sending a signal to your amygdala that you are safe. You are literally telling your brain, if I were in danger, I would be running or fighting. Since I am still, I must be the one in control. This lowers your heart rate and clears your mental fog, allowing you to access the tactical phrases and vague shields we've discussed. You move from being a passenger in your own body to being the commander of it. Stillness is the ultimate power move because it cannot be faked and it cannot be defeated by noise. You can't outshout a mountain, and you can't overpower someone who refuses to react. By becoming the physical anchor, you turn the room into a stage where you are the only one who isn't performing for an audience. You are simply existing with a weight and a density that makes everyone else's aggression feel light, hollow, and ultimately irrelevant. You are proving that the most powerful thing you can do when someone tries to move you is to simply not move. In the theater of conflict, aggression is almost always fueled by an assumption of speed. The overpowering person relies on the fact that you will either retreat or retaliate, both of which keep the momentum moving at their preferred velocity. When someone is being dominant, they are operating on a script of pure what they want, what you did wrong, and what you need to do next. They stay on the surface because the surface is where they can maintain their heat. To dismantle this, you must use the help me understand trap. This is the strategic deployment of curiosity as a weapon. By refusing to engage with the what and instead asking the dominant person to explain their how and their why, you are forcing them to do something their aggression isn't designed for logical justification. Aggression is a fire that requires a fast-moving fuel of reaction to survive. Curiosity is the cold water that forces that fire to explain its chemistry. When you look at an aggressor and calmly say, "Help me understand the logic behind that statement," you aren't being submissive. You are dragging them into a deep, slow-moving pool of accountability where their emotional heat cannot reach the bottom. The beauty of the help me understand trap is that it is socially bulletproof. On the surface, you are being the nice person, you are being open, inquisitive, and collaborative. But beneath that surface, you are conducting a psychological interrogation. When a dominant person makes a condescending remark or a sweeping, unfair demand, and you respond with, "I want to make sure I'm following you. Could you explain the specific reasoning that led you to that conclusion?" You have effectively reversed the roles of the interaction. You have become the auditor, and they have become the subject. Because most aggression is rooted in emotion or ego rather than hard data, the why is usually very thin. By asking them to explain themselves, you are exposing the hollowness of their position. You are forcing them to articulate their aggression, and as the old saying goes, to explain is to diminish. The more they have to talk about why they are being aggressive, the less aggressive they actually become, because the brain cannot stay in a state of high emotional fight while simultaneously engaging the prefrontal cortex for logical explanation. This technique is particularly devastating because it forces the dominant person to justify their behavior to an audience, even if that audience is just you. Most bullies operate on the shadow principle. They thrive when they can keep the interaction fast and murky. When you bring the help me understand light in that shadow, you make the behavior visible. If they say, "This work is sloppy and useless," and you reply, "Help me understand which specific metrics aren't being met so I can align with your vision," they are now in a corner. If they can't provide the metrics, they look incompetent. If they do provide the metrics, the conversation has moved from a personal attack to a technical discussion. Either way, you have won. You have successfully neutralized the overpowering energy by treating it like a legitimate request for information. You have essentially told them, "Your anger doesn't interest me, but your data does." It is a high-status pivot that says you are too grounded to be moved by their tone. Moreover, the help me understand trap protects you from the nice tax. It prevents you from becoming defensive. The moment you start defending yourself, "I worked hard on this," or "You're being unfair," you have lost your authority. You are now a subordinate begging for a fair trial. But when you ask for their why, you are the judge asking for evidence. It keeps you in a state of calm, detached observation. You are essentially holding up a mirror and saying, "This is how you are acting. Would you like to explain why you think this is productive? Most dominant people will subconsciously realize that their tactics aren't working on you. They will feel the friction of having to explain themselves, and like a path of least resistance, they will eventually stop targeting you. They want a yes or a fight. They don't want a lesson. By weaponizing your curiosity, you turn every attempt to overpower you into a mandatory seminar on their own behavior. You aren't just surviving the conversation, you are auditing it. You are showing them that if they want to enter your space with aggression, they better be prepared to defend it with logic. And in the vacuum of a bully's ego, logic is the one thing they rarely have in stock. In the complex architecture of human negotiation and conflict, the most potent weapon is never the loudest voice or the most aggressive stance. It is the silent, unshakable willingness to leave. We are often taught that staying in the fight is a sign of strength. But in the world of high-stakes social dynamics, the person most willing to walk away is the person who holds the ultimate power. This is the principle of exit authority. Most people who try to overpower you do so because they assume you are trapped by your own need for a resolution, your fear of appearing rude, or your desire for their approval. They believe that as long as they keep you in the room of the conversation, they can eventually wear you down. They view your presence as a guarantee. But the moment you demonstrate that your participation is a privilege, one that can be revoked at any second, the entire power structure of the interaction collapses. True authority is not about winning the argument, it is about knowing your hard stop and having the self-sovereignty to deliver it without a single syllable of apology. A hard stop is a psychological and verbal boundary that signals the end of the exchange. It is the realization that a conversation has ceased to be productive and has moved into the realm of disrespect or circular aggression. Most nice people fail here because they feel they owe the other person a conclusion. They stay in toxic loops for hours, hoping to find a pivot that will make the other person finally understand them. But an overpowering person doesn't want to understand you, they want to win. When you realize this, the only high-status move left is to withdraw your attention. Attention is the currency of the social world, and when you spend it on someone who is disrespecting you, you are telling them that their bad behavior is worth your time. The exit authority allows you to stop the transaction immediately. You do not wait for their permission to end the talk. You simply look at the situation and decide, this is where I stop. The key to executing the exit authority is the total removal of the apology reflex. When we prepare to leave an uncomfortable situation, we often soften the blow with softening language. We say, I'm sorry, but I really have to get going, or I hate to cut this short, but I've got a call. These apologies are power leaks. They imply that you are doing something wrong by protecting your peace. They suggest that the interrupter is the owner of the time and you are the thief stealing it back. A person of authority does not apologize for their boundaries. Instead, you deliver the hard stop as a neutral statement of fact. You say, this conversation is no longer productive. I'm going to step away now. Or, I can see you're frustrated, so we'll pick this up when we can speak with more clarity. Have a good afternoon. Then, and this is the hardest part, you actually walk. You do not stay to hear their rebuttal. You do not turn back to catch their parting shot. You move with a steady, unhurried pace that signals you are completely unaffected by their reaction. This willingness to walk away creates a scarcity of access that forces others to treat you with more care. When people realize that you will not tolerate being talked over, shouted at, or condescended to, they are forced to adjust their behavior if they want to keep you in the room. You are effectively training the people around you on how to handle you. If you stay and endure the aggression, you are training them that you are a safe target. If you exit the moment the line is crossed, you are training them that your presence has a cost. Respect. This is not ghosting or being passive-aggressive. It is being an adult with a standard. It is the realization that you are the CEO of your own life, and you do not have time for vendor meetings that don't meet your quality control. The exit authority is the ultimate insurance policy for your self-esteem. It ensures that no matter how loud the other person gets, no matter how much they try to overpower you, they can never truly touch you because you aren't a prisoner of the moment. You are a sovereign entity who knows that the door is always there. When you stop fearing the end of a conversation, You start controlling the quality of every conversation you have. You aren't just leaving a room, you are reclaiming your life. The ultimate power in any room belongs to the person who doesn't need to stay. If someone is refusing to respect the boundary, if they are continuing to dominate the space despite your resets, you use your final tool, the exit. You don't storm out. You don't get angry. Anger is a sign that they still have control over your emotions. You simply say, "It seems like we aren't in a place to have a productive conversation right now. Let's try this again when we are." Then you walk. No sorry. No I think. Just the fact. When you walk away from a toxic power dynamic, you aren't losing, you are winning by default. You are proving that your peace is more valuable than their drama. Go out there today. Don't be the loudest voice. Be the steadiest one. Stand your ground, say the name, and own the silence. I'll see you in the next one.